Ever notice how, like, when something totally random happens, good or bad, like, we just can't help but try to figure out why?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like, our brains just go into overdrive, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Trying to find some pattern or explanation. It's like we're wired for it. And that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Cool.
We've got some sources that really dig deep into this whole idea, like how we react to sudden good luck versus totally unexpected misfortune. And it's fascinating stuff.
Definitely. It's always interesting to see how people respond to those unexpected twists and turns.
Right. One quote that really stuck with me from the material was, when good things come out of nowhere, you start looking for more.
Yeah, I can see that.
But when bad stuff takes over, it's the worst feeling.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And it's so true, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Like, that just perfectly captures that human need to find patterns, to make sense of things, especially when they catch us off guard.
Absolutely. It's like our brains are constantly searching for cause and effect.
Right, so I'd love to get your take on this. Why do you think we're so driven to find these patterns, especially when it comes to unexpected events?
Well, I think it all boils down to our desire for control,
Yeah,
and predictability. We crave that.
makes sense.
We want to feel like we have a handle on things. And when something unexpected happens, it throws us off. It disrupts that sense of order we're always striving for.
Right, like it challenges our whole worldview a little bit.
Exactly. And so we start searching for explanations. We try to fit that event into some kind of narrative that makes sense to us.
So it's like a coping mechanism almost.
Yeah, you could say that. It's a
Yeah.
way of trying to regain a sense of control in a situation that feels out of control.
Oh, I like that. Okay, so let's break this down a bit further. What's actually happening in our brains when we experience these surprise events, both the good and the bad?
Well, when we experience something positive that we weren't expecting, our brains get flooded with dopamine, that feel-good neurotransmitter.
Oh, yeah, the reward chemical.
Exactly. And that dopamine rush reinforces the behavior that led to that positive outcome, making us want to repeat it. It's like a positive feedback loop.
So it's like our brain is saying, hey, that felt great. Let's do that again.
Pretty much, yeah. And that's why, when someone wins the lottery,
They might keep buying tickets.
right, even though the odds are astronomically against them winning again, because their brain remembers that dopamine rush.
Right, so it's not always rational.
Not always, no. And that's where it can get tricky, right? Because seeking out more and more good fortune can lead to unrealistic expectations.
Oh, for sure.
It can also lead to, some risky behavior.
Right.
I mean, it's important to remember that life is full of ups and downs.
It's true.
Expecting a constant stream of positive surprises, that's just not realistic.
But, I mean, even though there are downsides to chasing good luck, like,
Yeah.
isn't there also value in, like, holding on to some optimism?
Absolutely. I mean, optimism and hope, those are incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
It's really about finding that healthy balance.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So, when something amazing happens, absolutely savor it, enjoy it.
Right.
But, don't get so caught up in chasing that same high that you lose sight of, the bigger picture.
Okay, that's helpful. Now let's flip the script. What about when something bad happens out of the blue?
Well, in those situations, our threat response system kicks in.
Next step.
It's our primal instinct to protect ourselves from danger.
Oh, yeah.
So we feel anxious, we feel helpless, even afraid,
Yeah.
and our brains start scanning for reasons,
For explanations.
Yes, for
Good.
explanations, for someone or something to blame.
Right.
And this can actually be helpful in some cases, right? Because it helps us identify potential threats and avoid them in the future. It's like our survival instinct kicking in.
Right. So it's not all bad.
No, not at all. But it can also be problematic.
Okay, how so?
Well, for example, let's say someone experiences a sudden job loss.
Okay.
That can be a really traumatic event, and it can lead them to develop a negativity bias.
A negativity bias.
Yeah, it's like they start seeing potential threats everywhere.
Oh, I see.
They might overestimate the likelihood of negative events happening again.
So it's not just about the one event.
Exactly. It's about how that event shapes their overall perception of the world. It colors their view of everything. And that can make it really hard to appreciate the positive things in their lives.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So in both cases, good or bad, it's about how we interpret and internalize those experiences.
That's exactly it. And this is where understanding these cognitive biases can be really helpful. For instance, there's this thing called the availability heuristic.
Okay.
And this suggests that we tend to overestimate the likelihood of events that are easy for us to recall.
Oh, interesting.
So if you've just experienced a negative surprise, similar events might feel more likely to happen again,
Even if they're not.
even if statistically they're not very probable.
Wow, that's really fascinating. So I guess what we're learning here is that awareness is key, right?
Absolutely.
We need to be aware of these patterns in ourselves, both the positive and the negative. Because knowing how our brains react to unexpected events, well, that can help us manage our expectations.
I completely agree.
And it can help us make more balanced choices.
Yes, and ultimately it can help us be more resilient when those unexpected things inevitably happen.
So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive today, I'm left with one final question for you. Knowing all this, how can we use this knowledge to become, more resilient and adaptable? How can we navigate the inevitable ups and downs of life in a way that allows us to, appreciate both the expected and the unexpected? What do you think?
That's a great question. I think it starts with mindfulness. Being present in the moment, paying attention to our thoughts and feelings without judgment. And then, cultivating a growth mindset that's embracing challenges as opportunities for learning and growth. And finally, practicing gratitude, focusing on the good in our lives, even when things are tough. Because ultimately, it's not about avoiding the unexpected. It's about learning to ride those waves, the ups and the downs. That's what makes life interesting.
Well said. Thanks so much for joining me today. This has been a really insightful conversation.
It's been my pleasure.
And for our listeners, thanks for tuning into this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.